Hello, we are back. It is 1:28, almost 1:30 in Raw Science. It's not Raw Science, it's Insight Science, part of the Raw Science Department. Let me get it right. But you'll be happy to know that it's not just my voice you're going to hear now, because, let's be honest, I've talked too long. I have two very important people. Toby, my regular co-host on Insight Science. Say hello.
Hello, it's great to be back.
And welcome. And we have an extra special guest. Toby, your guest, so I will allow you to do the intro honours, but go
this
ahead.
is Faith. Would you like to introduce yourself, Faith?
Hi there, I'm Faith. I'm currently a second-year PhD student in the Astronomy and Astrophysics group here at Warwick, and I look at finding exoplanets or planets that are outside our solar system.
Perfect. So you've heard my voice enough, and I'll be honest, I was saying before when the mute song was on, my science physics stops at GCSE, neutron stars, all that. So I will hand over to Toby and Faith to sort of give you proper science while I make like fraudulent noises of yes, I understand.
I love how,
over to you too.
As an example of basic physics, you listed neutron stars, which are some of the most complicated objects in physics.
It's like the bits I remember: neutron stars and the convection, conduction, and like the difference between which.
So you remember heat transfer and compact stellar objects. That's a real range.
I'll put it on my Tinder profile. But no, over to you two with the proper physics.
Yeah. So Faith, do you want to talk about what you've been doing and what you found?
Yeah, so part of my recent work is actually looking at confirming the existence of two new planets. So we have two different types of planets. So it's actually what we find is that most of the planets out there are very different to what we have in our own solar system. So one of them is what's called a mini Neptune. It's kind of really what it says on the tin. It's sort of very gassy and kind of just smaller than Neptune. And then the other one is what's called a super Earth. And again, does what it says on the tin. It's kind of slightly larger than Earth, mostly rocky composition. So we use basically a big combination of data from space-based and ground-based telescopes as well that are all over the world to actually, look at how do we find these planets and how do we work out what they're made of? How do we work out how far they are away from their stars, their temperatures, and could we maybe even find life on some of these planets as well?
Ooh, but hold on. So I'm gonna digress into the low levels in terms of naming.
Naming, yes.
You're confirming them. Once they're who gets the naming rights?
So usually...
You're about to have your heart broken.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. So everything gets a catalogue number, initially based on usually the mission or the on the set of survey observations that have actually looked at it. So at the moment, mine is known as a TOI. It's called a Test Object of Interest. And then once it's named and once the mission is finished, it will probably become TESS and then its catalogue number. This has already happened with something like the Kepler mission, which was a previous mission that went up some years ago. So all of those objects are now known as Kepler, for example, 98 or Kepler 70b or something like that, depending on the planet. So unfortunately, we don't really get to give them any particularly exciting names. Some of them do, but I don't personally have any control over what they get called at the moment.
Astronomers are really awful at naming things, and it's kind of my interests in science lie at these sort of two extreme ends. I really love paleontology and I really love astronomy. And paleontologists are so good at naming things, they make astronomers look so bad.
Yeah, we are terrible. We just love acronyms.
It's like a paleontologist will find like a fragment of jawbone and be like, I will call it Pyroraptor. And then an astronomer will find an entire new world and be like, let's call it 51 Peg B.
51 Peg B is amazing.
Well, I did find there was a catalogue called Epic.
There is, Epic.
Some stuff.
Yep.
Which... yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. That's a great name.
Yeah, Epic, Wise, there's loads of cool names. But yeah, we are notoriously bad at naming things.
There's a mission called WASP. I like WASP, is it?
Yeah, so WASP is actually partially Warwick-led as well. So one of our academics in the department, Don Polacco, he works with WASP. That's kind of his big project, which has found a lot of really exciting new planets. It's a really, really big survey. And that's, part of what we do here at Warwick is these big surveys too, which is really exciting.
That said, even if the planets are going to get a boring catalogue number, have you thought about sort of informal names you're going to give them?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, like, who hasn't in this field? You know, like, you know, every time you find a new planet, it's okay, what kind of cool name can we give it?
Yeah.
So every so often, I believe the International Astronomical Union will have a sort of conference where they can actually give some of these planets official names. So like you said before, 51 Pegasi b, which was the very first planet we ever discovered outside the solar system, its kind of official/unofficial name is Dimidium, which is really cool, I think.
Very periodic table-y. It's very.
It does sound like
is.
the name of an element.
Yeah, it's very sort of sci-fi, I think. But a lot of them get named after things like sort of mythological characters and stories from all around the world. There's, you know, ones, you know, kind of named after like Japanese or Chinese mythology. Some countries kind of add their own sort of spin on it as well. Like each country will kind of give their own name to particular planets and systems or name them after scientists. So I have certainly thought about it, but not settled on anything quite yet.
If you put a British spin on it, you can name one of them like Beans on Toast or something.
Beans and toast.
But imagine if the planet you find is like the next Earth. I know there's been like many different like similar to Earth, many different which are like, oh, this is promising. Imagine if you find the one which is like, this is exactly competent for humans to live on.
That's extreme.
It's called Beans on Toast.
I would love that.
I would 100% move there if it was called Beans on
Yeah,
Toast.
I was going to ask, super Earths, they are one of the interesting planets for habitability, as far as I'm concerned. Although, from what I've read, they're not human habitable because of their gravity, are they?
So super Earths, really with all these planets, it definitely depends on things like temperature and the kind of conditions that they exist in as well. So particular stars, something that we call M dwarfs, and also K dwarfs as well, they have very different properties to our own sun, so that obviously can affect, you know, the habitability of the planets that orbit them. So it's definitely sort of, you know, worth looking at the whole kind of situation. There are some really extreme cases of planets out there. You know, ones that where their year is about 18 hours. You know, we have sort of 365 days, but some of them are so close in. And obviously it also depends on, things like whether you can have liquid water on the surface as well, maybe even under the surface. So you have to really kind of look at all different factors, and the atmospheres, temperature is a really big one, and also the general kind of composition of these things to really build up a full picture of, is this place, you know, does it have potential for human habitation?
But I just had a thought. So once we get to the stage of, okay, this is a potential human habitation, who takes over? Who's sort of because the scientists, the team will find it and be like, okay, we have data, we have stuff to say, we're confident. What's the next step? Who takes over and's like, it's ours?
Oh, I think that's kind of a difficult question, because we have found planets that are sort of Earth analogues, we would call them. So they're very, very similar. But in terms of who would sort of take over and do that, I mean, we're really currently in the early stages of this kind of research to actually be able to find planets of these sizes. I sort of remember a time when, you know, we'd only found planets maybe the size of Jupiter. And actually one of our biggest hurdles, I think, in terms of moving there is just the distance. You know, if something is, for example, my own system is about 90 light years away, which is relatively close compared to a lot of objects. But it's also, you consider, you know, traveling at the speed of light, that's still 90 years to get there. That's still a few generations to actually do a big move like that. But it is really the end goal of what we do, is to find these planets for potentially, you know, so many thousands, millions of years into the future that we can move somewhere else. I don't believe that humanity will finish on Earth. I really don't.
Neither do I. But that's when we get into very sci-fi concepts of interstellar travel and folding space and wormholes or cryogenically freezing people for long journeys, which is all an interesting speculation, but it does sort of leave the realm of hard science a bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. But I mean, these will be eventually things that we do have to think about. And we are kind of really providing that first step of actually finding these places for us to go.
But, so I need to say, when we record, because this show is live, when we take it and download it, I need to save this precise show. And so my great-grandkids are they or great-great-grandkids, are they the ones I need to sort of give this show to and say, we were going to be in space one day? Your great-great-grandfather called it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, come back in sort of a couple of 100 years and sort of see, what we've gone and done, what we've found out there. We are still, finding these really crazy planets that, by all accounts, some of them we think, oh, that's really strange case. And how does that even exist? And so we sort of think about the technological advancements, especially in astronomy over the last 100 years. And I would just love to see what we can do in the next, like even just another 100 years. It wasn't, particularly long ago that we were still taking images of galaxies on glass plates and publishing them in, big journals and things. Whereas now we're looking at, really very, very far away objects and actually learning about how they're structured and what they're made of. And it's just crazy to see what we've done so far and where it could go.
Exoplanetary astronomy is really new. I think the first couple were discovered in the 90s.
Yeah, I think I think the very first one was 1995.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how recent we're talking in terms of looking at exoplanet science. And, we've only really had, maybe 30 years or so to actually really examine the science and to sort of develop our strategies as well and our techniques and our satellites and instruments too, to actually find out as much as we can.
But, hold on, I know a bit. I watched a Simon Oxford video. I know a bit more. Hold on. So there is Hubble, which is like the main telescope for a while. Mm-hmm. But I believe there's a newbie. There's like a
James Webb.
James Webb, yeah. So people are sort of saying, okay, well, James Webb is like the successor to Hubble, but we can't forget about the Spitzer Space Telescope. That was another one. But yeah, so very recently we had the James Webb Space Telescope go up, and that is going to be really exciting to see the science that comes out of that. Even some of what I do, may sort of eventually rely on this data that we see from James Webb. It's a really, really exciting time to be doing this kind of thing.
James Webb is a very, very cool space telescope.
Yeah.
I don't like when people call it the successor to Hubble, to be fair, because it kind of isn't. Because it's observing very different kinds of light to what Hubble looks in the visible light, and James Webb is going to sort of focus on the infrared part of the spectrum. So James Webb is kind of a better telescope in a lot of ways, but also it's not like this is just Hubble but better. It is a different beast.
Yeah, and James Webb has a lot of other instruments attached to it as well to do all kinds of different science. So it is really going to feed into lots of different things. And it could have quite a long lifetime as well. I mean, Hubble is still being used even now, and we expected it to, definitely not be in use for as long as this. So it'll be exciting to see kind of, how long we will have James Webb for until it's maybe time to even replace that and to move on to the next big space project.
I was so nervous on Christmas Day for the James Webb launch, because this is like such a delicate space telescope, because it has this huge... What they did is they basically made it fold up so they could get this massive space telescope into a small enough rocket to launch it. And because it has all of these moving parts to unfold itself, it had something like 300 individual points of failure.
Ooh.
Yeah, and they had to make sure that every single one of those points of failure did not fail.
Yeah, so every single person into astronomy I know was just desperately watching this space telescope launch, like gritting our teeth, because that's all of our future potential careers going up in that rocket.
Yeah,
it better not break.
I was also watching it through completely bated breath. It was just terrifying.
It was. I was just there with all my family on Christmas morning, like, Happy Christmas, everyone, but I need to go rest because I'm watching James Webb launch and I'm losing my mind over it.
The rest of sort of Astro Twitter was exactly the same.
Yeah.
I chose the wrong degree.
No, you didn't. Biology is cool.
No, there was a time when I was like, yes, physics, and then I got to AS physics lecture lesson 1, and like the tutor was like, here's a test. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. I failed the test, left the room, dropped the subject.
Oh no.
But no, that's I digress here. I believe this is, we have 3 minutes left with Toby, so use it wisely. The brain's gone. Yes, that's what I want to say. So, we have these newly discovered exo sort of planets.
Yeah.
In terms of what's next in sort of the team the team's journey? What's next in the PhD process?
So I'm actually going to be moving on fairly soon to working on one of the big projects that Warwick owns. We have a big array of 12 telescopes down in Chile, which is called NGTS, or the Next Generation Transit Survey. And we're going to be looking at combining some of that data from NGTS with what we do with TESS, which is a current NASA mission that is the main one that I actually use for my data. And we're going to be looking at maybe confirming some new targets, finding even more planets, and also maybe giving it a slight flavour of looking at habitability as well.
Yeah, I'm also applying for a master's on NGTS. So I'll probably be working on this stuff quite a lot next year.
Yeah.
And I work with TESS right now for my final year project, which is a very lovely little space telescope. It's quite small, isn't it? It's about the size of a small car.
TESS is not especially big.
And TESS just sort of looks at the whole night sky in little segments for about 30 days at a time, and just all of its data is available to the public, and you can just comb through it. And which I think is really, I love open source science like that. That is always something I appreciate when it's done. And
yeah,
that's part of why I love TESS, because it's just all of this data is available on the internet.
I mean, that is the other thing, is that with NGTS, there's currently a project called NGTS Planet Hunters. If you Google it, you can find it. And it means that the public can get involved with actually doing, some of these sort of classification and trying to find these planets and these particular shapes that we see in our data. So I would definitely encourage people to, go and take a look at that and, see if you want to give us a little hand with sifting through all of this incredible amounts of data that we have.
Please.
Yes, please.
Will I get my name in the paper? Will, because,
but I'll give you a treat.
I'll
give you some chocolate.
I'll take that.
That's fine.
But no, so that was that. I think that was the best physics we've had on the show. That was.
Oh, thank you.
We've only done 3 of these though. We're
riffing on quantum tardigrades was something.
Quantum tardigrades was awesome, but I'm a big like Doctor Who and science and like planet nerd. So this I was just like, tell me more, tell me more. But
happy to do.
Yeah, for sure.
We will be back after the break. Although we do have to say bye to who is going to a very important meeting, all about more physics, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to go talk to my potential supervisor next year, who's also Faith's PhD supervisor, to ask very nicely if he'll take me on as a master's student next year.
And send them this show afterwards, after the meeting. I'll download the show and just forward it and say, I was talking about it an hour before I met up with you. But, so we will be, don't go anywhere, anyone who's listening, because we will be talking about long COVID. Long COVID has been, well, not solved, but we now understand why long COVID exists. And I'll be fraudulently using my advanced immunology module to pretend like I understand the data. But stick around for that. But in the meantime, this is from the C list. This is Ibidio Sound Machine with all that you want. You can decide on the pronunciation for me.